Be sure to follow my Twitch over at twitch.tv/daltonix. Thank you. Hello everybody, in today's video we're finally going to go over our top 5 hunter builds for PvP. Hunters have a lot of really good builds, so it was really hard to narrow it down, but I think overall I did a pretty good job at picking some meta builds with different playstyles. If you would like to see top 5 Warlock or Titan builds, videos for those will be down below, as well as dim links for all these builds. But without further ado, let's get into the builds. Build number 1 is one of the strongest hunter builds in the game. We are going to be utilizing the Solar Hunter, the Gunslinger. The first aspect we're going to be using is Knock 'em Down. This will give your super a nice little buff depending on which one you're using. I personally like Deck Shot for 6v6 and Blade Barrage for 3v3. It will also refund a powerful melee whenever you get a final blow while you're radiant. The second aspect we're going to be using is On Your Mark. This will increase the handling and reload speed of all your weapons whenever you get a precision final blow, as well as use your class ability. With this build, we're going to be heavily focusing on the uptime of the powerful buff Radiant. Radiant will buff your weapon damage by 10% whenever you have it active. This will overall make a lot of weapons more forgiving, and sometimes we'll even shift the time to kill of other weapons altogether. The way we plan on getting this powerful buff so often is with the Acrobatics Dodge. This will make it so you and your teammates get to be radiant for 16 seconds every time you use it with the Ember of Solace Fragment on. This is a very strong ability, not only being able to give yourself a 10% buff, as well as all your other teammates is super strong. We'll also be using the Proximity Knife. This mixed with Ember of Torches will make it easy to get radiant from our power melee hits. The reason we're using the Explosive Knife is because how easy it is to land. You can just throw it on the ground or in a crowd of enemies and get radiant. With these abilities, it makes it super easy to get radiant, but the downside is the cooldowns. This is where our exotic come into play. There's actually 2 options for this build. The first one being Aeon Swift. If you are using the Sector of Vigor mod on them, it will make it so you get 25% of your class ability energy back whenever one of your teammate dies. Now this has infinite range. Someone can kill your teammate across the map and it will still proc it. Side note, it says you get damage resistance as well. This only works in PvE, but these gloves are still great for 6v6 mode. You're going to have your dodge all the time with how often people are getting eliminated in 6v6 modes. The second exotic and my preferred pick is the Frosties 5. This is one of the best hunter exotics in the game in my opinion, and probably one of the most underrated exotics in the game. This exotic will increase your melee, grenade, and dodge regeneration speeds whenever you're sprinting. Now these speeds aren't light. You'll get 200 increase ability regen to your class ability and 100 to your nade and melee whenever you are sprinting. Overall making it so you can get your abilities back super quick. I definitely prefer these over Aeons just because they will get me all my abilities back quicker, not just my dodge. Healing Nade is also something I would recommend for your grenade. You will be running Ember of Benevolence as a second fragment. This fragment makes it so whenever you apply Radiant or Restoration to allies, it will bump up all the regenerations of your abilities. Now this buff isn't light. Coming in at a whopping 400% ability regenerate for all your abilities whenever you give them Restoration or Radiant is pretty crazy. Seeing as all your abilities apply those buffs, it makes it so you're going to have this buff up a lot. The last 2 fragments I would recommend are Ember of Beams to help whatever super you're using, getting a little bit more aim assist. And lastly, it's sort of user's pick, but if you're using a solar weapon, I highly recommend Ember of Empyrean just to keep the uptime of your Restoration and Radiant going. But if you're using something like Ace of Spades, which can 2-tap with Memento Mori and Radiant, then I would strongly recommend Ember of Mercy. This will give you a nice little jump to resilience, but it will also give you and your team a little bit more restoration. On this build, I would focus highly on mobility and recovery, and then putting the rest of the stats into intellect. And if you did enjoy that first build, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it does help out with the channel a lot. As of the recording of this video, we are less than 150 people away from 10,000 subscribers, which is crazy. Thank you guys so much. Now let's get back to the builds. Build number 2 is for my fast and aggressive players out there. This build will be utilizing the Strand subclass Threadrunner. This build is all about movement and getting around the map and getting the jump on your enemies. With our first aspect, Widow Silk, we're going to be getting an additional grenade charge, which is great. This will give us an additional grapple grenade, and as well as this aspect will make it so we can make a grapple point. If you don't know what a grapple point is, it will essentially just make this little point that you and your teammates can grapple to without using a grenade charge. And as long as somebody grapples to it once every 15 seconds, that will last there forever. Just an extra charge with your grenade is amazing, but this is a nice little cherry on top. The second aspect we're going to be using is Ensnaring Slam. This aspect will give you an air move that will consume your class ability. Whenever you hit the ground, you will suspend nearby targets for roughly 2 seconds with a Thread of Continuity, which is our first fragment. This ability can be very strong, but also very dangerous. If you're using this on a target, you definitely need to watch out for shotguns. They're very strong versus this ability, but when used right, this ability can get some crazy clutches or even free 1v1s. This ability is great for getting out of the air safely as well. You don't always need to use it to dive on some enemy. The exotic I personally love to use with this build is the good old Stompies. This exotic increases your sprint speed, slide distance, and improves your jump. This exotic is all about movement, and seeing as this class is a movement-based class, it's just a perfect pairing. You definitely do not need to use Stompies though. You can realistically run any exotic you want, but Stompies are really amazing for this build. On to the rest of the fragments. The second one we'll be running is Thread of Ascent. This will make it so whenever you grapple, you will get an increased 40 handling, reload speed, and 30 in-air effectiveness, as well as reloading whatever mag to the weapon you have equipped is. This is a pretty crazy buff for an ability that you can spam on pretty low cooldown, or just keep spamming to the same grapple point to get it. The third fragment we're going to be running is Thread of Generation. This one's pretty simple. Anytime you do damage to somebody, you will be able to get some of your grenade energy back, overall just helping the uptime of your grapples. Then lastly, Thread of Minding is an amazing last pick. This will give you a class ability whenever you defeat a suspended target. This overall will just help keep your class ability loop going. This build in particular is actually pretty high skill ceiling and definitely takes a little bit to learn right how to use it effectively, but when mastered, this is one of the strongest builds in the game and can be the hardest to deal with. For this build, you really want to focus on mobility and recovery, then dumping the rest into the discipline stat so you can get as many grapple grenades as you can. Build 3 is where we're going to become one with a rat. This build will be utilizing the Void Hunter, the Night Stalker. This class thrives on going invisibility and getting your leg up on the enemy. The first aspect we're going to be running is Vanishing Step. This fragment will make it so you'll go invisible whenever you dodge. Very easy and simple, but very strong and effective. The second aspect we are going to be rocking is Trapper's Ambush. This aspect will give you an air move that when you cast it, it will consume your melee charge and you will dive down and make you and your teammates invisible. This aspect gets even stronger when we mix in the exotic. We will be using Omni Oculus for this build. This is one of the strongest exotics in the Hunter's kit, making it so you can have pretty much 100% uptime on your visibility if used correctly. This exotic will give you a nice 10% damage resistant when invisible. That in itself is very strong, shifting the time to kill of most primary weapons. This exotic also gives you a second smoke bomb, but the real thing that makes this exotic so strong is the last perk it has. Whenever you make an ally invisible, it will give you 50% of your melee energy back. No, you heard me right. So all you need to do is make 2 enemies invisible to get your smoke bomb back for free. So you can go on about your day and be invisible for the whole match. I strongly recommend you use the Rat King exotic sidearm as well. This will make it so you go invisible after every single final blow. But any weapon will work great for this build if I'm being honest. This build gets even better when we get into the fragments. The first one we'll be rocking is Echo of Persistence. This will just make it so our invisible effects last 40% longer to help with the uptime and just make it so we're invisible for even longer. Echo of Vigilance will be up next. This will give you a 45 HP overshield for 7.5 seconds whenever you get a final blow on a target when you have no shields. So not only are you going to have a 10% damage resist when you're invisible, you will have a 45 HP overshield that the enemies is going to have to chew through as well. Not really much more to say on that, just how strong that is. Echo of Leeching will give you a nice little bump to Rezo, but will also be nice giving you healing on any melee final blows, as well as healing your allies with those melee final blows, granting some great survivability. Then lastly, I love Echo of Dilation. It will give you some extra mobility and intellect, which is fantastic, but also will enhance your radar and increase crouching speed, which is amazing for all the sneaking around you're going to be doing. For this loadout, I would also strongly recommend having a legendary weapon with radar booster on it. If you don't know, Bungie has made it so it shortens the radar distance, but with radar booster, it makes it a lot better. For this build, I would also strongly recommend running mobility, recovery, then getting resilience as high as you can get it. Build number 4 is a Stasis Hunter build. We're going to be starting off with the exotic of choice for this build, just because it is very important. The exotic we're going to be using is Mask of Bacchus. This exotic will change your dodge into a shift teleport one, and it'll have a little bit longer range. Then when you exit this dodge, you will have a 6% damage increase for your stasis and arc weapons. This buff will help the forgiveness of a lot of primary weapons, as well as just shifting the time to kill of others. Two of my favorite guns to pair with this is Trespasser or Scalar Potential. With the Mask of Bacchus buff, Trespasser actually has a 0.5 time to kill on any resilience, and the Potential will have a 0.73 time to kill on any enemies. The crazy playmaking potential with the shift dodge and the damage boost makes this a top pick for any Stasis Hunter's kit. The first aspect we're going to be running is Winter Shroud. This aspect will make it so anytime you dodge, it will slow nearby enemies, making it so anytime someone gets close to you, you can easily get away and have them slowed, have a damage boost, and make it so you can shut anyone down. This is fantastic when you're playing against shotgunners because it makes it very easy to get away from them. The second aspect we're going to be using is Touch of Winter. This aspect will enhance your grenade for whatever one you like to use. I have two options for you. The first one being Cold Snap. With the Touch of Winter aspect, the Cold Snap grenade will create a stasis crystal wherever it lands, and then it will chain one additional time. Overall, a good pick, but I definitely think the better option is the Dust Field. With the Touch of Winter aspect, the Dust Field will have a stasis crystal in the middle of it, as well as it will increase the size of the bubble of the Dust Field. Dust Field grenades are on a really short cooldown and very, very strong. This one nade can pretty much win any 1v1, for free, as well as shut down anyone being able to push you. They also last a whopping 12 seconds with our first fragment, Whisper of Durance. This makes it so any slows last longer, but this also increases the duration of our Dustfield grenades. Whisper of Chain is up next for our fragments. This will make it so you have a 5% damage resistance whenever you're around a stasis crystal or a frozen target. You will be around a lot of stasis crystals because of our dust fields. And as well, this fragment will give us a nice little jump to our recovery as well. Whisper of Shards is going to be up next. Whisper of Shards will give us 150 regeneration increase to our grenade anytime we destroy a stasis crystal. Overall, just helping fuel our grenades. We throw a grenade, destroy the crystal, we get more grenades. Overall, pretty simple, very easy to understand, but very effective. Then lastly, Whisper of Refraction. This will be our last fragment. This fragment will give us 15% of our class ability back anytime we defeat a slow target. This will just make it so we can dodge more, keeping the Mask of Vakris damage buff up more often. For this build, I would highly recommend building into mobility, recovery, and discipline. Now we are on to the last build. This will be another Strand build, but a very different playstyle from the other one I showed you. This one will be all about sending out a Threadling army, making it very hard for your opponents to push you. This build did get nerfed a little bit into the latest balance patch, but definitely feel it is still one of the strongest builds in the game. The first aspect we're going to be running is Widow Silk. We talked about this one a little bit earlier, but we'll be using it to get a second Threadling grenade this time. So with this aspect, we'll have 2 of these powerful grenades to sick the Threadlings out on our enemies. The second aspect we're going to be using is Threaded Spectre. This aspect makes it so whenever we dodge, we will leave this little decoy behind. This decoy is very strong. It can be used to block shots and has a good amount of health on it. But whenever it is destroyed by you or an enemy player, it will drop 3 Threadlings that will go out and chase enemies, as well as the decoy will explode and do damage to other players if they ever get close to it. And it will also ping on the radar, so enemies will get confused over whether it's you or a clone. Great for radar manipulation. This ability is very strong, and the Exotica choice just helps enhance that even more. We're going to be using the 6 Coyote. This exotic will just give us an additional dodge charge, making it so we'll have 2 of them to help this ability have a lot higher uptime. The first fragment we're going to be running is Thread of Evolution. This fragment makes it so the Threadlings we send out will do increased damage as well as have a 30% increased movement speed, and will go 30% further, just overall making it even more amazing to push players back or help flush them out of cover. Thread of Generations will be up next. This fragment will make it whenever you do damage, you get more grenade energy back, just helping keeping the uptime of our Threadling army going. Thread of Ascent is up next. This will make it so you get plus 10 mobility, as well as getting a huge bump to your stats every time you throw your grenade, giving you 40 handling reload speed and giving you 30 airborne effectiveness, as well as reloading your equipped gun. Then lastly, I have 2 options for you. If you are a Strand weapon user, I would highly recommend running Thread of Rebirth fragment. Makes it so whenever you get a Strand weapon final blow, you have a chance of spawning a Threadling. But if you're not really the Strand weapon type of person, I get that. I would opt into running Thread of Binding. This will give you a boost to your resilience, as well as making your super a bit more deadly. It will emit a burst of suspending energy whenever you take down a target with your super, and this little explosion typically will just one-shot enemies, making it so you have a little bit of aerial effect for your super. And lastly, for this build, I would highly recommend you build into mobility, recovery, and discipline. And that is it, my friends. Those are the top 5 hunter builds in the meta, in my opinion. How do you feel about this list? Am I missing anything? Let me know what you have had success with down in the comments. And again, be sure to check out the Warlock and Titan builds. Links for those will be on screen. And thank you guys so much, and have a good rest of your day.